This episode of the CUInsight Experience is brought to you by Elan Credit Card. Elan partners with more than 250 credit unions to provide an outsourced credit card program. Welcome to episode 141 of the show. I'm Randy Smith, one of the co-founders of CUInsight.com, and I'm excited you're all here today. This show is all about taking a deep dive with the leaders of the credit union movement that make it so great. Today, I've been looking forward to this conversation. I'm having one with Mr. Paul Gentile. Paul is the president of Merck Federal Credit Union in New Jersey. Paul, welcome to the show, my friend.
Randy, thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate being here. Wow, you've done 141 episodes. That's incredible.
It is crazy. We just passed, I think, earlier this month, 200,000 downloads. So crazy for a little credit union podcast that could, right? So,
congratulations.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you being here today. For people that listen to the show, your name has probably come up on more episodes than about anybody, probably except for Jill. And the reason why, and this is why I knew we were going to have so much fun with this conversation, was when we were very early on starting CUInsight, you were a person that I would bounce ideas off of. And what I appreciated about you was that you were honest with me always. Sometimes you'd be like, why the hell do you think that's a good idea? And I would just, come back to you with tell me more, tell me why. And so I knew this conversation was going to be great. I appreciate you. But for everybody out there, maybe who they don't know you, which most people probably do, but where'd you start? How'd you get to credit unions? What brought you to Merck after all these years in the system?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was a journalist by trade. I think I'm a big fan of writing. I've been writing my whole life, and my early career out of college was a journalist in New Jersey. And I eventually found myself at a credit union publication, which was the greatest at the time. I'm sure it's still the greatest. I don't read it as much as I used to, but Credit Union Times. And it was based down in West Palm Beach, Florida. So I moved from New Jersey to West Palm Beach, Florida. And I became a writer for Credit Union Times, eventually became the editor, and eventually became the editor and publisher. So I did the writing as well as the business side of it. And what a tremendous way to learn about credit unions, because when you're a journalist, you have to know about all different types of things, right? So one day you might be writing about core processing. The next day you might be writing about the Hike the Hill events in DC. You might be writing about new leadership in credit unions. So it's a really great way to cut your teeth and learn a lot about the industry in a very, very quick amount of time. And then from there, I went back to my great home state of New Jersey, and I became the president of the New Jersey Credit Union League, which is the state association for New Jersey credit unions. That was a great run, had a tremendous amount of fun there. We passed some groundbreaking legislation that allowed New Jersey credit unions to accept public deposits. And we also, which I'm most proud of, did Banking You Can Trust, a big consumer awareness campaign, which I'm really passionate about, consumers learning about credit unions. And then from there, I went to the Massachusetts Credit Union League, which is the cooperative credit union. Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped one little stop. I went to CUNA. It was a short stop. I went to CUNA in Washington, D.C. for just 1 year. And CUNA was fantastic, right? It was in D.C. I was executive vice president of strategic communications, which was true to my skill set. And CUNA is fantastic, but I had an opportunity to go to the Massachusetts Credit Union League, which is now the Cooperative Credit Union Association. And we did the groundbreaking merger there, bringing in Delaware. So we had Delaware, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island. We were the first league with 4 states, so we were proud of that. Also did some great consumer awareness there that we were very proud of. So again, consumer awareness, I think, is so vital for credit unions. And then after a 5-year stint there, I came back again to the great state of New Jersey to run the Merck Employees Federal Credit Union.
You can't stay away from Jersey, eh?
Yeah. So yes, back here at Merck. Merck's a fantastic credit union, $2.5 billion. Very, very traditional credit union that really lives the people helping people philosophy. Everything we do here is for the benefit of the member. We have one of the lowest fee structures in any financial institution. It's very, very hard to even get a fee here at our credit union. We pay one of the highest dividend rates in the country. Throughout COVID, we paid over 1%, which was startling because, you had most big banks at 5 basis points, et cetera. So it's a great place here at Merck. It's obviously a great corporate sponsor, Merck Company. And that's kind of the background, Randy.
That is awesome. Let's jump into credit unions. What are and I feel like I'm teeing this up for you here, my friend. What do you see as the biggest challenges that credit unions are facing? And I would add to that, like, I guess in your answer is where do you think the priority should be at the NCUA to help tackle, the issues that are facing us?
I think they're kind of related, NCUA and the biggest challenge. I have to say, if you asked me this 20 years ago, I would have said consumer awareness because I thought we were so behind the curve with consumer awareness in America. It actually used to frustrate me when World Council of Credit Unions, which is a tremendous organization, we spent so much time on International Credit Union Day back in the day. And it's a wonderful thing, International Credit Union Day. But I used to always say, people in America don't know about credit unions. Right. We have to focus there first. But I think the trade associations and credit unions have done a great job stopping the confusion about what a credit union is. So I don't think it's consumer awareness anymore. To me, far and away, the biggest challenge we have, unquestionably, is technology. I think we have so many technology challenges as a system. And it's not just keeping up with what the big banks are doing. If you look around the credit union technology landscape today, really what do you have? You have a few big IT providers. You look at core processing, which is the largest tech solution a credit union has. You really have two major players to choose from today. I'll tell you an old story. Back in the day of credit union times, there were so many core processors that we ran a section. Maybe some of the older folks will remember this. We ran a section called Changing Shops. And every month, the core processors would send us their new credit union clients. And then the credit union clients they lost. And it was a little controversial section because everybody would get it and say, hey, who's winning new business? Is it EDS? Is it Fiserv? If you did that today, you would only see people going from one or two processors. And I think that's particularly bad for the small and mid-sized credit unions, right? They get hooked into these core processors, very hard for them to leave from a cost standpoint. And that bothers me. And I've expressed this to NCUA. I think Todd Harper's a fantastic chairman. I've told him we have to look at what does the IT landscape look like for credit unions and how can we stay a bunch of competitive options for the credit union industry that make sure we continue to develop new technologies and not stay sort of stagnant.
If you think about that, and I don't know if this ties into it, but like the idea of beyond the bigger banks or credit unions, that there's so many non-traditional financial institutions that are doing traditionally financial institution things. And at times, it seems like they're able to maybe move faster, make the pain points less on the transaction. I could send you money right now, no problem. You know what I mean? You could send it back to me if you wanted. That's while we're still having this conversation without forms or so. Is there something there when you're talking about, the two big cores?
I think you hit the nail on the head. And that's really a dynamic shift for credit unions because credit unions historically, one of our biggest strengths was our third-party vendors. I still think it is. But I just think there used to be more of them to innovate, and we had more things that we were working on. Now, credit unions will not stand for this, right? We'll create QSOs, we'll do our own things, and those things will all happen. But if you do a core processing conversion today, you're talking about a year to a year and a half. I don't think credit unions are going to put up with this moving forward, and I think things will technology will develop where it's easier to move around and make sure you have the best and brightest for your members. So not only the core providers and that we have limited vendors compared to the past, it's also just keeping up with like what you said, the payments, the payment technology, the lending side of it, how quickly you get loans at other places. I still think members want to do business with us compared to all those other providers, but we have to have the technology to serve them, right? We can't be slow. It's not an area where you're going to be a leader if you're not with the latest and greatest technology. So I think IT far and away is the biggest challenge that we have, no question.
Let me ask you this, and this is kind of jumping ahead, but it was something that like just popped into my head as you were saying that. How does that affect making credit unions a desirable place to work? If we need to move, right, to be more tech organizations, how do you see us, quite honestly, just getting the people that have that skill set today to want to come work for us and maybe not something that they view as, doing air quotes, sexier out there than credit unions,
Well, I think it's our story. I think our story is still the best story you can have. We're not-for-profit financial cooperatives dedicated to a membership base. And I think it's so unique in America today to have that kind of story. I think people do want to work at credit unions, and I think people do want to innovate at credit unions. So I think our story is fantastic. And credit unions have such an open mind with innovating that if you get to the right credit union, you're going to have leadership that wants to do these new things. I think it's like almost like a startup scenario for a lot of credit unions. And I think that's exciting for younger people as well. I do think, the whole wave of working remotely, I think it's great. I think it's important, but I'm still a big believer in the collaboration you get in person as well, right? Maybe it's not in person all the time, but nothing like having a team together, right, around a table and day to day, because things just come up, and being able to walk next door. And so there's still always going to be a place for that to me. And credit unions are so people oriented. I just think we have an advantage when you talk about IT in terms of getting new people and being able to do these things.
What has you the most excited as you're looking forward?
I think that credit unions, our opportunity today in America. I mean, look, if you turn on the TV, what are the biggest ads you see? Mortgage lending, right? Investment services. It's everywhere. People want your money to invest it, and they want your money for you to borrow it to purchase your next home. I think the value we have is trust. I still don't think people trust other entities as much as they trust their credit union. I see it here every day at our credit union. There are people that just want to do business with us for various things because of that trust level. So that's always been the backbone of credit unions, member trust. So all these things that we're talking about, Randy, new technology, new investment offerings, et cetera, we're uniquely positioned to take advantage of that.
I'd like to talk a little bit, kind of going back onto your career. A lot of people that listen to the show would someday like to sit in one of the chairs that, whether it's the CEO of Merck or maybe a trade association president and CEO. When you think back along your career, were there people that helped you along the way? Did you have, like, as I mentioned, that you were kind of one of those people for me that I would bounce things off of? Did you have a group of those folks around you as well that kind of helped you as you navigated this career that you've put together?
Sure. I mean, I absolutely had a mentor. Whenever asked about this, my mentor was 100% Mike Welch. He was the publisher of Credit Union Times. He had such a great background in credit unions. He ran CUIs, the Credit Union Executive Society, so learned a lot about the association side from him. He also was the PR director at CUNA, so learned a lot about that side of it. He was a tremendous mentor, and one of the things that I learned from him, and it was good for me as a journalist, always very skeptical about everything, right? Always questioning things. That was kind of the nature of journalism, and I think that helps you in a career path, right? You got to be inquisitive. You got to challenge things. So he was no doubt my mentor. When you look at trade associations, I still look back fondly on Dan Mica. Dan Mica had a unique ability to make you feel like you were the only person in the room of 1,000 people when he was talking to you, but he genuinely cared about people and credit unions. And that's what I think is so important, right? To this day, care nothing more about my members and my employees. And those folks early on were just great, showing that credit union spirit. And I really look at those two, but undoubtedly Mike Welch was clearly my mentor.
Was there something, that great investment that when you look back on your career that you made that you think was invaluable? I use the example that Warren Buffett said it was a Dale Carnegie course.
Well, I think Credit Union Times was like the ultimate education course in credit unions, but I got to say this, I don't think you could be scared to move around a bit, right? It's so easy to get comfortable in roles. And early in your career, I'm talking specifically, right? Very easy to get comfortable early on. I think you have to challenge yourself and take on new opportunities. So me jumping to the trade association from a publication, that was a big jump.
Yeah.
That was a big challenge. And I think we did it great in New Jersey. So you got to take some risks for sure.
This is like one of these questions that it's completely scratched my own itch, but just one I would find intriguing. Coming from a trade publication, going over to a trade association, that does seem like quite the leap. Was there pushback or questions that you had to answer? And I think people might find this interesting just because I'm sure other people are looking at opportunities like that maybe they're getting the pushback from, say, the board or somebody that's doing the hiring that's like, well, that doesn't really fit your lane. To me, that seems like you were switching lanes.
Totally switch lanes. But if you think about the good of trade associations, what are they the best at? Communicating. If you have a great trade association, but they don't communicate well, they're not going to do very well with their membership. So my background was always communicating. Credit Times is communicating. So that's what a great trade association is, communication. So I think that's what helped me tremendously. And you had the knowledge of credit unions. What you had to learn was the legislative side of it a little deeper, right? A lot of nuts and bolts. See your lawmakers, the political action committees, raising money and all that. But, you can learn all that. Again, it comes back down to communication. And that's why the consumer awareness was, that's what I sort of interviewed on. I'm such a believer in consumer awareness of credit unions because I think our story is phenomenal. And we tell ourselves a lot, each other in the industry, how great we are, but we have to tell the consumer.
Absolutely. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about building a team. We talk a lot about culture, it seems like today, and that team culture. So this is really taking it that step back. When you're looking at adding to, say, your senior leadership team, is there something that you look for? Like who makes in your mind, what maybe traits do make people a good leader to add to the team? And then on the flip side of that, is there a no-go for you? You're sitting down with somebody, they want the job. You're like, they say something, you're like, yeah, never.
I mean, that's a little easier part. I guess the one thing that I always get concerned about is when people continually to talk about their past and how they did things in their past careers. I mean, some people you'll find they, even after you hire them for a long time, they'll continue to go back and back. It really does happen still. And they'll say, we always did it this way. And they'll say, at big companies, they do it this way. And that always kind of worries me. I mean, they could be great people, but you got to get them thinking forward. For me, again, Randy, when I bring on somebody new, I want a communicator. I want somebody responsive. I want somebody who has good awareness. I think the most important thing in business is awareness. In other words, you could be at one credit union and you could be a very bold, innovative leader, but you got to be aware of your surroundings and what's going to work with your group, with your membership, right? Maybe you have to go a little slower at one organization. You can go a little faster at another organization. If you don't have that good natural awareness of what you're operating in, it could be a challenge. So again, it's always back to, you got to adapt to the new situation where you are. Because I've been in, 5 good places I mentioned, and all had a different appetite for change and growth, and you got to adapt to that.
So how do you maybe stay away from the trap, I guess? That's the way things have always been done. That idea that I think, I'll be honest, I don't know if we hear it as much as we used to in credit unions. I think that we've started to see progress, but how do you make sure in whether it's your, Merck at your current organization or if it was at past organizations that you didn't get set in that mindset?
I mean, you may not hear as much, but I would tell you, people fall in love with their past sometimes, right? It does happen a lot. So I just kind of, when we interview, it's very much about what is our status here and where we're trying to go. And just try to hear if that innovative spirit is there with the person. And you got to remember too, Rennie, like there's a lot of big sky thinkers, right? We're going to do this, we're going to do that, but it's nuts and bolts stuff. You need people that can execute. So I do listen a lot for that. What kind of project work, project plans, execution type things. Because we could all sit around and get on the microphone and say big, bold things, but if you can't execute, it doesn't really help you. So
absolutely.
We like to hear those stories of execution, right? When they execute it.
So let me ask you this. When you've built your team, how do you give feedback? Like sometimes when you're taking I don't want to say big risks, but when you're taking risks or you're trying to push the bar forward, their mistakes will be made. So when somebody screws up, they let you down. How do you give that feedback to course correct?
Well, from day one, we always stress, I love mistakes are great. You make a mistake, as long as you own up to it, don't hide it. And we talk about it. Mistakes could be the greatest thing that happens sometimes. And I've seen that where we've done something, go, wow, but maybe we should be doing it this way. So we really, anybody who joins here, if you have a mistake, let's embrace it. Let's learn from it, right? Let's certainly not pass it on. Oh, this is because somebody didn't do this. When you hear that as a leader, you get worried, and you hear it from time to time. So-and-so didn't do this, so I didn't realize. And you got to learn from the mistakes. But I have constant communication with my team. We have weekly meetings, obviously, but it's also just constant, right, when we're seeing things. And I think the other good thing is to challenge your team to think differently and let them bring the ideas up. The best ideas should prevail, whether they're coming from me as the CEO or somebody, on the teller line. Best ideas should prevail.
Absolutely. I love that. What do you think makes a good CEO? You've been the CEO of multiple organizations. What does it take to be a good leader in general?
Well, I think in the credit industry, particularly, you have to get along well with your board members and with your team. And I've always viewed boards very differently, right? I hear stories people have get at odds with their board, and I know it happens. These are challenging times, but the board is really your partner, and you have to challenge them to know that they're not just there watching you, making sure you're doing okay and you're doing everything right. It's a partnership, right? Like you never should fear your board. Your board is your partner. And I think you just got to really stress that with them. We're in this together. I think sometimes with duties, I think, well, that's your job. This is my job. But it is truly a partnership with your board of directors. And again, you got to communicate. I feel a lot of pride when we have our board meetings.
Yep.
I don't want 3-hour board meetings. They know going in, they know what's happening because I'm constantly pinging them with emails. Right? If you have to have calls with your executive committee, you let them know in advance. Nothing should be a surprise at a board meeting. So again, it comes back to communication. Always been my mantra. Let everybody know what's happening at all times, and you're going to do better off. If we have an hour and a half board meeting, that's long for us.
Let me ask you this. I mean, that's one thing I've noticed over the years, and as more friends became CEOs, just as we get older, no matter, it seems like to a person, even if they were in a senior leadership position before becoming the CEO and they went to board meetings, that relationship with the board, it was kind of, there was always that learning curve the first time you get that chair, right? For that person who's sitting out there, maybe they're a fairly new CEO. What's the hack that Paul's picked up over the years on establishing that board relationship that you talk about early on, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, it can't be exhausting. If it's an exhausting relationship with your board, right, and you're spending so much time on that, that's going to hurt the institution or the entity. So you got to get to that comfort level where, hey, like I said, we're in this together. I find I've got tremendous board members where I am. I feel like I've been very lucky. Every place I've been, I've had great board members. But I think you got to really know, what the focus is of each individual board member. You have people who want to have no involvement on the financial side. That's just not where their head is. They're more on the growth, the marketing, the diversity, things like that. You got to really know what each person is honed in on. And then hopefully you can make sure they get in the right roles that are going to, best flourish for them, whether it's on a committee. I encourage credit unions to use committees to their advantage as a CEO, right? You have a fundraising committee for those folks that want to be out in the community. They want to be part of those things where you're delivering checks or you're going to PAC events, right? And then you have the others that like the real technical stuff. So I try to really make sure the board members are matched up where it best fits for them. Because remember, no one's getting rich on these boards. They don't get paid. So they should at least get some personal satisfaction, right? I think in the best interest of the entity, of course, but I think they do it out of the spirit of cooperation. So if they get that fulfillment, I think it's a great thing.
Absolutely. A few more questions on leadership. You mentioned, Merck, over a $2 billion credit union, pretty big ship. How do you make sure that, you're still innovating, that you're taking new risks? Sometimes the bigger an organization gets, the tougher it is to steer that ship,
I think it's listening. It's listening to the member. I actually do one thing on my board meeting now. Every month when we get solicitations or emails from our members, we have a lot of channels for how our members can reach out to us. You'd be surprised how much a member will put in an email or the online systems. I can share some very funny emails and things that we get. So what we do now is I compile those interesting ones. I put them in the board packet, and it's almost like the Jay Leno out on the street.
Right.
It's called What Members Are Saying. And we go through each of these comments each month, and you find a lot of innovation in there because they'll just challenge things. They'll say, hey, why can't I see my IRA's required minimum distribution in the online banking system? Now, that may sound very boring to you, but somebody who's the IRA is very important in their life, knowing what their RMD is at any time, they can go online and see it. Our system currently doesn't do that. I would love that. So I think part of it is really just listening to the membership because they're seeing all the innovation in other parts of their life and they challenge you. So we're very in tune to that.
Do you have one that sticks out that kind of cracked you up or that you just had to share with the group? Or?
Oh, I do. Oh, wow. Well, we had a board meeting last night. This isn't really crazy, but it just makes me very excited. This one member wrote in, I want to go completely paperless. I don't want to get any paper from the credit union on anything. Isn't that a great thing to hear? Because we don't want to send out a paper.
Yeah, I am that. I am that member, Paul. Please do not send me anything.
They meant like everything. They don't want a marketing piece. They don't want anything. So, we just get funny ones from time to time, but it challenges you. It really does challenge you.
Absolutely. So you kind of talked about it earlier, that idea that like you still appreciate that the in-office experience for the team and to be together, but also that you see the benefit in that remote work. What does a credit union or does a career in credit unions look like to you 5 years from now, 10 years from now?
Well, I would hope it would be balanced, Randy. Like I would hope, we do have people, we want them to work remotely when it's, there's some lifestyle benefits for them, right? But I would hope it would be a hybrid where, yes, you have that opportunity, obviously, depending what discipline you're in with the credit union, but that the credit unions never lose sight of, hey, let's make sure we have some in-person elements. And I'll give you an example. I think really, unless you're in a credit union, you may not know this, though, if you read the financial news. One of the things that we see here more than often is fraud attempts. I mean, fraud attempts are through the roof. I mean, you wouldn't believe it. Every week there are significant fraud attempts. And I don't mean like hacking, cyber attacks. Those are going on as well. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, fraudulent wires, fraudulent account takeover. People are out there constantly trying to get your information and penetrate systems. Anyway, when we do fraud training, we really like that to be in person. And you think it's high tech, you can do that remotely, but we get our people together and all talking about the fraudulent things that are going on and listening to the speakers. Like that's invaluable. So I just think you don't want your people to lose sight of their colleagues. So I hope, we stay sort of a hybrid model as we move forward.
Yeah, I can see that. Even with us being a completely remote organization, we get together a few times a year just to all be in the same room, right? You have to. And before we just have a little bit of fun with the rapid fire questions, I kind of want to circle back to the very beginning again. If there's one thing that every credit union out there has to be looking at today to stay relevant, what is it?
Well, again, I come back to technology because I think in 5 years, 10 years, if you don't have the technology, you're just not going to be able to compete. So it's got to be IT. And that's why I worry, Randy, as I said earlier. I hope our vendor space continues to stay diverse, number of different opportunities. When I see all this consolidation, I mean, there's been tremendous consolidation. If you look at the core processors, they're under two roofs now. I just worry about that. So again, IT to me is the future of where we are. And if you can't be there, it's going to be challenging.
Okay. Complete another scratch my own itch question, but you mentioned consolidation. So I have to throw it out there and ask you, when you were in Massachusetts, you mentioned that, you brought 4 leagues together. We've seen the leagues consolidating even more here recently, the past few weeks, let's just say. Is that good for the system?
It's fine if they maintain their independence on the advocacy front. So when we merged New Hampshire, Delaware, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, they all had their own moniker. In Delaware, it was Delaware Credit Unions, Rhode Island Credit Unions. And we went to all the events. It wasn't as much about CCUA. You would see the Credit Unions of Rhode Island. That's how Rhode Island liked it. And when you had your advocacy meetings, you weren't sitting around with Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, talking about Rhode Island issues. The Rhode Island Credit Union CEOs chart their course. The Massachusetts charts their course. But that's really takes a lot of work. You got to stay true to that. If you don't stay true to that and you start melding everything together, then you got to worry about that, right? The states with more credit unions, the bigger assets could win out. You got to stay focused on the advocacy side. Then I think it's fine because the other parts of the business, education, compliance, those things could be aggregated. You get some economies of scale, but the advocacy and the consumer awareness, to me, have to be state by state. Because the cultural differences in the state are our strengths, right?
Absolutely.
What sells here in New Jersey isn't going to sell there in Florida or some other state. So I think that's the key.
I couldn't agree more. I guess I've kind of been wondering that as you're seeing even the geographic diversity of some of the leagues expand, where, like you mentioned, in the Northeast, each state's different, but they're all fairly close together. So wanted to respect your time. So we're going to start to wrap this up, but it wouldn't be the CUInsight experience without a few rapid fire questions. So first one, your answers don't have to be rapid. The questions are, though. When was the last time something just amazed you? And what was it?
In a good way or bad way?
Either way.
I'm amazed the last few months, just the political dialogue in our country. I'm just amazed how far we have changed and how personal everything's gotten. And I think we're getting numb to it, but every once in a while I hear a comment from a lawmaker. I just can't believe it. I don't think we would have heard this even 10 years ago. We've become a personal political landscape. And I'm just amazed by that because it's supposed to be about what's best for the country.
As the CEO of an organization where employees, members are all over the place, but knowing how polarizing, has that created unique challenges in leading?
I avoid that at all costs. I just think it's a challenge for our country now, and I avoid that in the business environment. But I think it's amazingly sad how personal it's gotten in the political scheme and not as much about the greater good of what's good for the country as a whole. So that amazes me.
Absolutely. So, I've found over the years when talking to people that are in leadership positions, they tend to be go-getters, right? Like as far as their career is concerned. And at times that can come to let's say, a deterrent to the personal relationships. Any hacks that you've picked up over the years on making sure that, you're doing your professional side, but you're also keeping the home life happy too?
Yeah, your family's everything, right? Your family is much more important than your work. So you need a supportive family group. You have to take your time with your family. I've been fortunate over the years. My family's been able to travel with me on work things. So I think that's when you could do that. That's great. I remember at the New Jersey Credit League, I had my twin boys. A lot of the New Jersey credit leaders remember this because they're 18 now. But my father was being the general sessions with the twin boys, 1 year old, 2 years old on his lap. Things like that. And they got to know my father, my kids. And so if you can integrate work in the nice way, I think that's great, but you got to take your time, right? You have to take your time and unplug. Though I will say I'm not a big believer I know some people will never answer an email. I find that bad for me. I like to just at least have a clue what's going on. Doesn't mean you're not relaxing, but to me, it's more stressful coming back with a million things versus just having a pulse, right? Not micromanaging, but having a pulse. That's all.
Absolutely. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received and who gave it to you?
I think the best piece of advice I received, I would go back to my mentor, Mike Welch, early days in our West Palm Beach offices where Credit Union Time was located. And what he would always tell me is to verify because you hear so many various things. And boy, it's more important today than ever, right? Everything you hear, is it true? Is it not true? And we were so big on verifying before we did anything. And I still do that in my business today. And I come back to the vendors. I'll say it again. You go to these credit union shows, you see all these beautiful booths, these vendors you've seen for years. But when you get into the nuts and bolts of working with that vendor, you got to get away from the hubbub of it and verify that they're going to deliver on what they're supposed to deliver on. I know I keep harping on it, but I see it in credit unions. I think it's a big challenge. So I trust but verify everything.
Trust but verify. I love it. What's the greatest album of all time? That one you can listen to from front to back.
Oh, very easy for me. It's not. I don't go by album names because I'm not good at that. But obviously, I'm a New Jersey guy, so Bruce Springsteen was big to me early on. I went to University of Delaware, so I loved George Thorogood and the Delaware Destroyers. He wasn't as popular as many, but I was a big fan. But far and away, for me, my biggest music group that I listen to all the time, just about every week, no matter what, is Queen.
No kidding.
Yeah, awesome. I'm a big Queen fan. I think Freddie Mercury was the best performer ever and the best vocals that you're going to find. And I just love listening to Queen.
That's fantastic. Are you reading something currently, or is there that book that you just think everybody should read? Maybe one you've gifted?
Well, I'm reading a couple things right now. I'm reading the Salesforce CEO, Mark Benoit, because Salesforce is such a big, mega public company. But if you read about how he built the company, so dedicated to the communities he was in, customer, charitable efforts, really interesting about how you can run a great company but still be so focused on those other things. I'm also reading right now the Anthony Bourdain book, the biography. I thought he was a cool dude. I used to watch all his shows all around the world. So I think that's a great book.
I just finished the one that what his producer wrote about him. I'm not sure if that's...
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. I'm a fan also, and it's interesting to hear the stories, but yeah.
Yeah, I would say, by the way, for the industry folks, I think Mark Seabright's book is great. Again, I'm not good with the names, but it's on my bookshelf.
We could link to it for sure.
About the digital world that we're all facing. I think you got to understand the digital world. He does a good job summing it up.
Absolutely. When you hear the word success, who is the first person that comes to mind and why?
Success? You mean just in my world or anywhere?
When you hear the word, who's that person that popped into your head?
Michael Jordan.
Okay.
I'm a big Michael Jordan fan. I think he went 6-0 in the NBA Finals, and he's a billionaire, and he's done some tremendous things, and he transformed the way an athlete is looked at, and just been a big part of things I followed over my time. So that's who I think of when I think of success.
That is a good one, that's for sure. Last question. Do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share with the audience, or, asks of them, quite honestly?
I just think for our industry, we have to continue to innovate. We can't get stuck falling in love with ourselves. I think we talk a lot about how great we are, but we got to continue to work together and collaborate. I would love more credit unions to work together on IT things. I know some of them do it. I'm not involved in any, but I think it's so important for our future. So if anybody's interested in any IT collaborations, I'm certainly interested, because I think it's the big challenge of our times. And you know what, Randy, just at the end of the day, we are in the greatest industry. So you got to enjoy it and have fun and know that you're really doing a good thing every day, right? I always say to people, why'd you stay in credit unions? Because you can really look yourself in the mirror at the end of the day, right? We're not out here making money, seeing people trying to get their money to invest it. We're just trying to do the best thing for them. So enjoy it.
That is the perfect way to wrap it up. I appreciate you greatly, my friend. Thanks for doing this and being here today.
Yeah, and say hi to Jill for me.
I will do that as well. She knew we were talking today, so she did say hello. So, and with that, just a few things before we go. Make sure to check out Elan Credit Cards in the show notes. Their digital technology, industry-leading rewards products, and commitment to the credit unions make them a great partner for the show. I'm grateful for their support. I get to have this much fun doing what I do. Please also subscribe to the CUInsight experience on your favorite podcast player. We're on them all. And if you're looking for a book mentioned, like the ones Paul mentioned today, a quick Google of the CUInsight experience podcast book list, and your next is on its way from Amazon. Last but certainly not least, thank you all for being here today and listening. Y'all rock. I appreciate the kind words that come in about the show. We will be seeing hopefully everyone around in person soon here too. So have a great day, everyone.